Data. It's the currency of the 21st century, but it can be a bit of an Achilles heel for internal communicators. There seems to be an endless list of acronyms and values to remember. CTR, ENPS, ETR. If this lineup of data acronyms freaks you out, you're not alone. After all, you didn't get into communications because you love spreadsheets. We live in an age where many leaders are expecting a return on investment for their efforts, and the internal and corporate comms departments are no longer immune. So what should you measure? How do you report it? All this and more on this episode of the Internal Comms Procast. The Internal Comms Procast is sponsored by Circle. Circle provides personalized email, intranet, and app engagement solutions for diverse workforces. Let Circle make your communications job easier. Learn more at cerkl.com. Circle, weird name, awesome engagement. Welcome to the Internal Comms Procast. I am your host, Barry Williams. Today we'll be discussing which internal communication stats you should be measuring, how to report your successes, and how to turn your losses into powerful innovation ammo. When we started thinking about the best ways to measure internal comm success, one name immediately came to mind.
My name is Cindy Crescenzo. I'm president of Crescenzo Communications, and we're located in Chicago, and we specialize in employee communications consulting and training.
If you don't know Cindy, you really should. She is an internal comms native, having established herself first in external marketing, but she and her husband, speaker, thought leader, and consultant, Steve Crescenzo, are making waves and changing organizational communication for the better.
Actually started from the external point of view. I used to be the director of marketing for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and everything I did in that world was all about numbers, knowing my audience inside and out, knowing how to sell classical music to younger audiences. I just really needed data to drive all of my decisions. And I am married to my business partner, my best friend, Steve Crescenzo. He's also very well known in employee communications. He's a speaker and consultant as well. But he was already off in the internal communications world. And one day we decided, let's do something other than getting married. Let's also go into business together. And that's how I went into internal communications. I just kind of followed him around a little bit, went to see his clients, talk to his clients to really understand what internal communications means, the needs of internal communications. And I started to notice a big hole at the time. And that was the fact that a lot of internal communicators didn't measure, or they didn't measure the right things. So that was my big aha moment where I thought I could really do some good in the internal communications industry. And that's how it all got started.
Cindy and I share a love for data because we know it's one of the best ways to prove the impact of your work. But she understands that many internal comms pros do not share this view.
So many communicators are the creative minds, right? They're writers, they're journalists. The thought of crunching numbers and figuring out data, they'd rather chew glass than do that, right? So the measurement part starts to fall down the priority list, and that has become an issue as well. Communicators really need to embrace it and own it and really understand that measurement can only help them energize their role as a communicator, because it will feed you the insights that you need to know what's working, what's not, but also it completely feeds your editorial plan because you're out there talking to your audiences. It does so many things for you. So we definitely need to embrace it more on the internal side.
An understanding of the stats that impact turnover can show you if there is a potential problem lurking in the shadows. If you're not tracking your stats, you have no way of improving and no data to make your case internally. Before you pull the car over to Google the ultimate list of key performance indicators for internal communications departments, Cindy warns there is no magic list perfect for all organizations.
I think it's different for everybody. I really am not a fan of one-size-fits-all measurement strategies. There's not that one silver bullet that solves everything for everybody. When I work with people, internal communicators, I tell my clients, think about what success means for you at this organization. You always want to start with, how does communications help the organization succeed? When you can define that, I think then you know what questions to ask yourself in order to figure out, is what we're doing working or not working in relation to those organizational goals? I think if you start there, it starts really helping you hone in on what you need to pay attention to.
Depending on your organizational goals, there are some things you could track, measure, and report to help you gauge your success. The first is time on Intranet. This stat helps you figure out if your staff use your intranet as a valuable resource that improves their work life or an antiquated, difficult-to-navigate portal. Look at the pages viewed per session to see if associates are easily finding and consuming your intranet offerings. Are you getting a ton of searches for travel reimbursement forms or health benefit forms? If this content is hidden, you may want to think about pulling it to the homepage or making it easier to find. This will lead to your staff spending less time searching and more time doing. Also, look at the unsuccessful searches to see what information may be missing from your site. Three more stats to measure, and why the current holy grail of measurement might be tough to tackle after the break. Internal Comms Procast is sponsored by Circle. Circle uses artificial intelligence to increase engagement for organizations of all sizes. Let Circle's AI save you 40 hours a month by automatically designing, personalizing, and sending your staff newsletter. Learn more at cerkl.com. Circle, weird spelling, awesome engagement. And now we're back. Email is where much of employee communications happen, but frequent, long, irrelevant messages slow productivity. Start by measuring what staff are reading, then begin to apply what you learn to reduce the noise and increase engagement. You can take a page from the marketing playbook and track open and click-through rates. The open rate is one of the easiest email stats to understand. It's simply the percentage of emails that are open from the overall amount that are delivered. Click-through rate is a measure of success for your email campaigns. A higher click-through rate means a more engaged audience. This ratio is crucial for measuring if the content you are delivering in your corporate communications is of interest to your team members. A great click-through rate drives traffic to your intranet and video content. Not every message is right for your whole staff, so begin creating or refining your staff segments. You can segment by location, job duties, or even using the org chart. Heck, do all of it. Segments aren't perfect, but they get you a little closer to matching your message to your staff audience. Another stat to track and report is your browser and device traffic. Your email, intranet, or app might be perfect on your PC or phone, but do you know how it appears for each member of your team? Your Google Analytics can show you what devices and browsers your team are using to access your content. You might be surprised to find out that a large majority of your page views are coming from mobile devices. Work with your web team to make sure that your employees are having a good experience with your communications and intranet, no matter where they are. When you're looking at new engagement programs, make sure the use of them matches the preferences of your associates. If you want to earn some bonus reporting points, begin tracking your Employer Net Promoter Score, ENPS for short. Net Promoter Scores have been on the scene for a while, but have mostly been used as a customer service tool. Now organizations are using them as a way to see how loyal employees are. It's an easy survey to execute because there's only one powerful question. On a scale from 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this organization as a good place to work? The results are then broken down by detractors, passives, and promoters.
Yay!
Detractors are the employees who gave you a score from 0 to 6. Passives chose 7 or 8 on the scale. Then there are promoters. Those are the superstars who gave your organization a 9 or 10. To figure out your Employer Net Promoter Score, just take the percent of promoters and subtract the number of detractors. Your score will range from -100 to 100. Any result between 10 and 50 is a good score. If you aren't in this range, don't shy away from reporting the results to leadership. It can help you push innovative initiatives forward. Cindy again.
You know, the best way to do it is straightforward and honest. You got to rip off that Band-Aid. And I think employee communicators, internal communicators are a little fearful because of what I just described. You know, over the years, we've really had to fight for our seat at the table to be more of a strategic arm of the organization and not an order taker. So I think we're a little bit more shy about reporting failures, so to speak, things that are not working in internal communications. And if you flip it and think about it differently, bad numbers aren't necessarily a bad reflection on you. In fact, they can help internal communicators redefine their role. I've seen this happen over and over again because you're identifying what works and what doesn't work. It gives you the ammunition to communicate differently. It gives you the ammunition to try new things. So the more you can measure and report back, this isn't working, you can fight that centuries old phrase that we keep hearing over again in some of these organizations. Well, that's how we've always done it before. That's why we communicate this way. This gives you ammo to try new things. You can actually show people, look, I understand we've been creating an employee newsletter for 30 plus years, but here, I've got the measurement to prove people are not paying attention to it. Our messages aren't getting across. Here's the best way to reach your audience. It starts to prove your value as a communicator.
Right now, the most asked about staff for internal communicators is employee engagement, but Cindy cautions that the responsibility for growing that number shouldn't begin and end with the communications department.
Well, I think the biggest buzzword now is employee engagement, and that's like the holy grail. How are we doing? How are we with our employee engagement scores? And it's somewhat of a little pet peeve of mine because I feel that a lot of communicators feel that they have to take ownership of that engagement, but engagement has so many different variables. You know, it goes from everywhere from management skills and how's your manager to the environment that you work in. Communications does play a role in it, but I feel that that's probably the toughest one that people really can't get their heads around because there's so many things involved in engagement, and communications is just one little aspect of it. Just because you can have the best intranet, the best tools in the world, but if somebody works for a really bad manager, they're going to have a lot of complaints about the organization. It's just, people quit their bosses more than they quit their organizations. It's that direct contact, so many variables that goes into the engagement.
If you're having trouble getting started with measurement, don't worry. It's a lot to take in at once, and Cindy has a few simple suggestions on how to start your measurement journey that I really love.
For anybody listening out there who's not loving measurement, I really do encourage you to think about one thing. The best way to get started is think about a piece of content or a series of articles or videos you're doing. Ask yourself, what does success mean when it comes to this? Think about it ahead of time. Once you can define that as specifically as possible, you'll start to think about questions you can ask along the way to figure out if in fact was successful or not. Measurement will fuel your communication strategy and your editorial strategy.
Even a self-confessed data nerd like Cindy can admit that tying data points to internal communication activities is difficult, but it's definitely worth it.
It's hard. It is challenging. I'm not going to lie, and I do it for a living all the time. But I think the fact of the matter is that internal comms isn't always tied to a dollar figure. It gets a little bit fuzzy. Coming from the external world, that was so much more clear cut. I could easily draw a line from my communication pieces to ticket sales, right? I had a direct connection to that. Internally, we're not always connected to the revenue. And it gets a little bit fuzzy, a lot of gray areas as far as how do we figure out if what we're doing is really making a difference, if what we're doing is what we can term successful. And I think that that's the hardest thing. And the reason why communicators kind of shy away from doing it.
We want to thank Cindy for her insight this week. Cindy and Steve are taking their internal communications masterclass on the road. You can learn more about their work and upcoming masterclass series at crescenzocom.com. On the next Internal Comms Procast, surveys. Many organizations use surveys to measure employee engagement and sentiment, but they can be cumbersome to manage and difficult to gain insight from. We talked to UK employee communications thought leader Joe Dodds about how to conduct, interpret, and learn from employee surveys. We'll be diving into what makes for a good employee survey and how you can successfully use them in your organization.
Ultimately, we don't really need to know or want to know percentages and figures and all that sort of stuff. What we really want to know is, bottom line, what do our people think of working here?
Jo gives us some insight into the UK employee engagement movement and shares the lessons that can be brought across the pond to communicators in the States. See you next time. Internal Comms Procast is produced by Super Awesome Media. Our executive producer is Rachel Foles. Connor Sweeney is our engineer, and Michael Masilli is our digital media specialist. Our theme music is Please Listen Carefully by Jawser via the Free Music Archive. Show notes and more are available at internalcompspro.com. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at InternalCompsPro. Thank you for listening.